on Life's Terms coach, and life is life. And so tonight we are going to discuss some things. We're going to discuss the boundaries. We already talked about boundaries. My goodness, what happened here? What happened here? I lost my notes. A girl's got to have her notes for real. I got to stay on track. So we've been talking about boundaries. We talked about the reason why you need boundaries. We also talked about why healing is important before we set boundaries, because we can't just go off all willy-nilly and start saying, I'm going to set some boundaries and some rules. Thank you for those hearts. And so we're going to talk about that more. We talked about the difference between judgment and discernment, because judgment requires us just to set boundaries, which we may be thrown off. They may be knee-jerk reactions due to our triggers, because judgment and triggers all come from learned old behavior and learned old fears. You know what? I'm not sure that does any better. All right. Sorry about that. Disconnect that light. We don't need the bright lights because it glares on my glasses more. So we talked about the judgment and discernment. We talked about whether or not we need boundaries, whether, hello, Kim. How did I know you would still be looking? Thank you, darling. Thank you. Just for y'all. So yeah, I haven't done, thank you. So yeah, talking about boundaries some more. I'll pick that topic for the week. And so I think that it does help for us to learn, when people pleasing and things like that, when are we feeling obligated or appreciation? Because this is when we get put out, because first boundaries we need to get comfortable setting are with ourselves. The boundaries with ourselves, we don't think about that. A lot of us didn't learn how to set. Oh, let's hope they're not creeping tonight. Let's hope they won't. I'm not showing the cleavage, you see. So we got that going on. No cleavage this evening. So thank you, darling. So yeah. So tonight we're going to talk about what happens when they ignore our boundaries, right? These are people that sometimes when you're trying to set a boundary, then they come back at you and say, don't talk to me like that, right? This is what they do. They'll say, don't talk to me like that when you're trying to say, look, this is what I'm doing today. And they're like, don't talk to me like that. But they can come at you all kinds of sideways. So this is what we're talking about tonight, is when people ignore your boundary and are committed to misunderstanding you, and they're not going to do anything. So we're going to talk about a few different scenarios here this evening and try to just recap the week. So I'm glad that you're here to watch the creeping if they come. There's just that one dude that was here the other evening where you were in here, right? With whatever. He kept showing up in all the different accounts. So we're not even going to summons him back in by mentioning, but yeah. So we're moving into the practical side of boundaries this evening. So we spent all the time talking about loving boundaries. That's where we get to come from discernment, to where we're not judging somebody. Thank you, darling. I sure do appreciate you. I sure do. Are you and Bethany having a great time? I saw y'all got to have lunch today. Hello, Rodolfo. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here too. Thank you. So yeah, we're going to talk about boundaries again. Do y'all have any great ideas for topics next week? Any ideas? We'll probably come up with something we can go to. I still have Sunday, because story time with Stacy will close with a story about boundaries. And how different ways that they can be unobserved, and how we can start learning to set loving boundaries. Oh yes, we snuggled on the couch and watched movies all day. Yay! It's going to be a great weekend for y'all. So yeah, Rodolfo, I like to inspire others by my wonderful conduct. Well, we like it when you have wonderful conduct too, Rodolfo. Thank you. All right, so more and more are coming on, and as they start to come on, we'll start talking about these boundaries some more. So Kim has great plans this weekend, and so Rodolfo, what about you? Anybody else? There's 3 here now, so yeah. I don't know what I did. Laying on my back. You get to be at a certain age where you can lay on your back and hurt your back. Craziness. So, all right. Well, we talked about the boundaries. They ignored my boundary today because a lot of people will start off, we talked about how we start off gently setting boundaries. We can't just come in with the rules. They're not, we talked Wednesday, Wednesday, we talked about boundaries are not ultimatums. They're not rules. They're not, Rodolfo, I might go for a walk and clean my nasty kitchen. That's what I get to do tomorrow. Is I got a client tomorrow, and then I'm cleaning my house. Hello, Muhayer. So, we're talking about boundaries. So I'm going to get started because I think we got an audience here now. So we've spent time talking about the need for loving boundaries and why many people didn't learn healthy boundaries growing up. We can't just think our way into boundaries. Hello, Waverly, Tony in Waverly, Ohio. How are you this evening? So many of us learned extremes. We learned chaos, withdrawal. These are things we might have learned in our households, whether they were really quiet households where people didn't talk about anything, or whether they were really chaotic households. We learned these extremes. So we might have learned passive aggression. This means giving people the business. This means when we're sulking. Well, you're welcome. You're welcome, Tony. Or we might have learned emotional shutdown. We might have learned to abandon ourselves. We might have been taught not to even consider ourselves. Many of us were taught to sacrifice. We talked about that. Over functioning is one of the things that we may do because if our household was meant to look perfect, we may just be trying all the time where we're wearing ourselves out, over functioning. So also there is control. A lot of people think that boundaries are about control, and that's not what boundaries are about either. We're talking about loving boundaries because we live in this electromagnetic universe. And what we have learned is when we try to control something, the more they push back, right? So it's not about the pushback, but we're going to talk about the pushback tonight because not everybody you set boundaries with are going to respect them. Some people will, but we usually have to learn a different language because if the language we've been using isn't working. Hi, Stacy. Hi, Angela. I see. Hi, Stacy and everyone. Hi, Angela. It's good to see you tonight. So, carrying on more about these boundaries this evening and what happens when people don't observe our boundaries and don't respect our boundaries. So these are the reasons why we may need boundaries, the need to learn to create these boundaries. We didn't learn healthy limits. We just didn't. A lot of us learned to perform, a lot of us learned to caretake, a lot of us learned to people please, a lot of us learned to, be rebels, a lot of us learned to carry on different characters to please people or not to please people when we got tired of control. So, like I said, we live in this electromagnetic universe of paradoxes, attraction, and repulsion. And oftentimes, when we're passive aggressive and give people the business, we're trying to control. We want our feelings to be seen. We want to be seen. And our feelings are hurt, but we don't know how to express our feelings are hurt. So we do this passive aggressive thing. So we're learning how to use our words, learning how to find our voice, because that's our empowerment. Empowerment, though, isn't control. It isn't. Hey, Angie T, how are you? It's good to see you. So thank you. So this week we've talked about, if you've came in the other two lives that I did on boundaries this week, we talked about recognizing when our boundaries need to be set, about learning about is it obligation or appreciation, how we can appreciate and set those boundaries with ourselves to where we don't feel obligated. So knowing the difference to whether we're obligated and we're just appreciate. I had to learn how to do that too, because used to if somebody was nice to me, I thought that I had to overgive. This is where overgiving comes in. So the boundaries we set with ourselves, where boundaries need to be set. And then when we set boundaries with ourselves, then we'll feel comfortable setting them with other people. A lot of people feel uncomfortable and they feel guilty and they feel like they don't know how, when they try to set a boundary with somebody else. So when we set them with ourselves, we have a firmer voice. We're not sounding as if we're scared. And we're also looking people in the eye. NG mining. I don't know what you're talking about. So thank you. So, on topic tonight, we're talking about boundaries. So, learning to process emotions through regulated breathing was something that we learned. The difference between judgment and discernment, that when we're setting boundaries out of judgment, those probably aren't boundaries out of love because probably somebody's hit a nerve. So, we've talked about the importance of healing so that we can set loving boundaries. Because when we heal, we can set loving boundaries and not, there you go, Kim. So, and not, you know, but you don't have to do anything, but we'll see how that goes. Joe Cat. Hi there, Joe KT. Joe KT. Okay. So, emotional support through a trusted friend. This is how we know the difference. Because sometimes somebody does something and it may not be even mean. We may just be hurt by something else in the past. So, something somebody does in the present, even though it may not come off bad, it hits a nerve with us. So, now we move into the next part. Okay. So, how do we actually set boundaries lovingly? And what happens when people do not honor the boundaries that we set lovingly? Because sometimes this is where some people will crazy make you. Does it, sometimes you can't, move along from that. Sometimes you might need to make a plan to move along from that. So we're going to talk about that, your different scenarios tonight. Thank you very much, Rodolfo. I don't think my top looks like a doily either. I thought that was what he was saying. So, how we actually set loving boundaries. They need to be loving because people are more apt to hear us. Okay, Joe. Well, don't be inappropriate. Try to listen here. Angela, narcissists disrespect our boundaries on purpose. What can we do about this? Well, I have to leave narcissist. I'm not going to participate in narcissist. Now, other people can't leave narcissist. So, Dr. Romani here on YouTube, she's an expert in this because some people have children. And when you have children, you can't, thank you, Joe. When you have children, you can't leave a narcissist. A lot of times it's very hard. And then hey, Hard Rock, how are you doing this evening? So, there's a lawyer on here, Rebecca Jung, I believe is what her name is, or Zung, or something like that. Anyway, there's a narcissist lawyer on here that tells you, what you need to get together if you need to leave a narcissist. Because when you're trying to raise children with a narcissist, you may set boundaries even for the children, but the narcissist will always undermine what you do. They will. So, it's a whole process. So you're right though, the narcissist will not respect your boundaries. Oftentimes when you try to set a boundary with a narcissist, even when it's loving, they will crazy make you. They will say, don't you talk to me like that, and all of this kind of stuff. And it's like, I didn't say anything bad. You can talk to me all crazy, but when I try to just state to you that this is what I need, or I'm not doing this right now, or something like this, then they will like lash into you and try to make you feel guilty. So we kind of touched on that, I think, the other night. For me, I was married to someone with narcissistic behaviors, and I had to pray my way out to get a divorce. I would get out under the full moon, I would get out under the new moon. I would pray all the time, get my candles lit and be praying. And it finally came to be that I was able to find my way out, because it's not easy. You can't tell a narcissist really when and all you're leaving when you leave. If you're not going to put up with a narcissist, you just have to just decide one day, I'm not dealing with this anymore, because they are not going to change. Well, thank you, Arunawal. Joe, I'm the complete opposite. I'd eat anything you made and say you did a good job, and it was shocking. Well, thank you, Joe. Angela, exactly. They get angry when they disrespect you. Yes. Yes, they do. So they twist and turn everything. So there's no way to communicate well with somebody who's committed to being narcissistic. It's really sad though, because sometimes we can see that hurt, wounded child underneath. And when I was dealing with this and when I was in therapy, I would tell my therapist, but he looks at me with those puppy dog eyes. And she's like, Stacy, he's not a puppy dog because they are little wounded children. So it's very hard. Thank you, Yari Uniswald. So it's very hard because all right. Are Uniswald, I need you to stay on topic. We're talking about what to do and setting boundaries. Okay. All right. Thank you. So, I had to leave a job because they got to be narcissistic, and I couldn't tell them. I wished that I could have told them why I was leaving a job, but I couldn't even tell them why I was leaving the job because they were committed to not understanding me. There's nothing that I could have said, and there was no way that it was going to end nicely. So again, I watched videos on leaving a narcissist job. I'm so grateful for YouTube and all the information that we get on here because it's hard to deal with somebody with narcissistic traits. And so, you just have to cut ties if you can, but it's not easy. And you can't tell them. I did say something about, because narcissists will break your stuff, they'll break your stuff and they rage and things like this. And it's not acceptable. That is not acceptable behavior for an adult to me. So I am not going to tolerate that. I'm also not going to tolerate these one-sided relationships to where somebody can talk crazy to me and yell at me, and I don't want to yell back, but I'm not going to be participating in something to where they're trying to guilt me, and they'll do that too. They'll tell you, like the job that I worked, I said, well, this makes me sad because they weren't trying to help me resolve to a solution. And that's what I was looking for was a solution. And they're like, well, if you think this, because I said, well, this makes me sad because they were doing a personal attack on me. And yeah. And so when they did that personal attack, I said, this makes me sad because I pride myself on what I was doing with working with people, and I did a great job. And so they're like, well, if that makes you sad, I suggest da 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 da. That is totally gaslighting. That is somebody not trying to understand your point of view. It's somebody that's, trying to tell you what you need to think and you need to feel. And that's where the codependency comes in. This is why a lot of people end up in codependent relationships, is because for so long they got used to it and that's what's familiar. So we talk about breaking those cycles and those interrupting those patterns. Angie. Good, Joe. I'm glad you don't raise your voice because as adults we don't need to be yelling at each other. Angie, wow, I've never heard that boundaries with self first. Yes, because then we'll feel more comfortable setting them. And we feel more empowered when we learn to set the boundaries with ourselves first, saying, I'm not going to subject myself to this, and then we'll feel more comfortable telling somebody else that I'm not going to participate in this. I'm not going to subject myself to this. And sometimes we just say, no, I'm not doing it. What about dealing with borderline personalities and boundaries? That is another topic. I'm going to have to study that one, Rodolfo. Let me write it down, though, because I will study it. And maybe Sunday we can talk about that borderline personalities and boundaries, because I'm not great at dealing with, I haven't had any dealings with borderline personalities and boundaries. So that would be something I would have to study. So I'm not going to tell y'all something I don't know. I don't know. I have to study that one, Rodolfo. Thank you. But I'm sure that that is a big problem because some people have chemical imbalances that some people have chemical imbalances and they maybe can't control their emotions as well, you know? Oh, my God. How to better communicate with others. Okay. So let me write that down too. No, it's not worth shouting. I'm glad that you, Joe, that it's not. Yeah, it just lets the people next door know all your shit. You're exactly right. Communicate better with others. Angela, we can't tolerate people who don't want to understand us. Absolutely not, Angela. Absolutely not. There's some people who are committed to misunderstanding you. There's some people who validate themselves through the fights because they have a need to feel right. Hey, Robbie, I'm glad you're here. How are you this evening? Like your neighbors, exactly, Kim. I could hear Kim's neighbors fighting one night. So calling the police on them and things. I know, Joe. So, when this happens, when people don't honor them, Angela, that's where many people become discouraged because disrespect. They finally begin using their voice only to be met with resistance. So then they think boundaries aren't working. Well, it's not that your boundaries aren't working. It's that the people are committed to misunderstanding you. There are people who are committed that they have to be right all the time, even if with some people, you can say, "Oh, the sky is blue," and they'll say, "No, no, I think that the sky is gray." They're going to argue with you. Some people will do that. Thank you, Rodolfo. And so, when that resistance may look like they may question your boundaries, like, "Who are you? What?" They may test your boundaries and be like, "Whatever." And they may push your boundaries and they may guilt trip you and they may manipulate your emotions and they may ignore a clear no and be like, "You're not the boss of me." And the crazy thing is I have said those things to a narcissist because I've had narcissists do those things to me. Some people want to fight and feel superior and important. Absolutely, Angela. Yes, they do. Joe, you're so nice. Thank you. Robbie, we got another guy, Joe, up in here too. So we got a couple of guys in here. So y'all feel free. Comment nicely. So, pushing boundaries, guilt trip us, manipulate our emotions, ignore a clear no, violate physical, emotional, and mental space. They will get in your emails. They will, when you're trying to meditate or do something else, they can't stand silence, a lot of people. These people are hard to set boundaries with when they know what you want and they still craving attention because her youth is long behind her. Joe Smith, we're here talking about boundaries this evening. So you're welcome to be here, but we're not talking bad. Okay? So that's a boundary. Continue showing the same patterns, same problems, promises, and same behaviors. Sometimes we have to set boundaries with people in our own families or people that are close to us because some people will walk all over your boundaries. There are actual what we call boundary hunters. And was it Kim? Was it you I was talking to? Somebody I was talking to last week, or maybe it was y'all, probably y'all that I was talking to last week that we call them, some people will hold you hostage. There's some people that will talk to you about their problems, the same problems over and over and over and hold you hostage. And some people are just trying to be nice and they won't let you get away. And you just have to interrupt and say, "Well, thank you for sharing that. Gee, I hope things get better. I've got to go though. Okay." That's what we have to do is how to set loving boundaries is we don't want to judge these people because I think as human beings, our biggest fear is being judged. One of our biggest fears. We fear being judged. We fear somebody taking what we have or losing what we have. I mean, not getting what we want or losing what we have. Those are some of our biggest fears. Some people want attention instead of solutions. Absolutely. You're right, Angela. And those people we have to set boundaries with too, unless you like participating in that. But I found that it was a lot of time, it was time consuming and energy consuming. So some people may call those people energy vampires. That's a need to have boundaries too, is when people just suck the energy right out of you. If you don't want to be mean, where we set boundaries with ourselves, a lot of times, especially at holidays with my clients, I tell them, look, because they'll be like, "I want to go, but I don't want to go because people do this when we go, or people do that when we go." So it's about setting the boundary with ourselves, saying, "Okay, I'll go for 30 minutes. I'll go for an hour. I'll pop in and say hello." Because a lot of times just making an appearance is respectful, right? If you feel an obligation or duty or whatever, because some family, sometimes people do it, holidays feel family obligations. So just popping in and saying hello or saying that we're going to wait an hour, we'll sit here an hour. And if they start popping off and saying, saying things that are disrespectful, what about if they gears? Now, no, you would holla. We would holla. Police, somebody help. We would do those things. Gears. Concept is flawed big time. Okay. Well, we're talking about, normal instances where people would set boundaries. So continue showing up with the same patterns, same problems. This is often where people feel powerless, where people are just like sucking our energy, where people are always in distress. See what we do, that's being more codependent because that's more enabling when we're helping the same people over and over with the same problem. Then we're being codependent and we have to ask, what am I getting out of this? Because you're getting something out of it by trying to be the rescuer or something like this. Because I did it. I got the book. But it is, and that's what I oftentimes ask people, what are we getting out of these belief systems? I had to learn that too. That's what my coach asked me. What are you getting out of this? Because it's that proof, it's validation of the old tapes oftentimes. And so this is another time when we have to set boundaries with ourselves when we're looking for proof and looking for the old tapes. Oh, jeez. All right. So boundaries are not about controlling other people. They're not threats, they're not ultimatums, as I was saying before, they're not punishments. Boundaries are clarity. That's what boundaries are. Boundaries are loving. They communicate responsibly. There are some strange comments up in here this evening. I'm glad that you're here, Joe. Have you subscribed? I hope you subscribed. Hi, Jim. So, yeah. Boundaries say to others that this is what I need to stay emotionally present, honest, healthy, and connected. Because you're worthy. You're worthy. We don't need to second guess ourselves. Oh, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you subbed. I appreciate you spending your Friday night with me because that's what I get on here for. Oh, okay. Thank you, Angie. All right. I appreciate you. You have a good night, okay? All righty. So boundaries are a language of love. That's really what they are. Because how many times have you not set boundaries? Because this is what happens when we don't know boundaries. And this could have been learned behavior too. It certainly was in my origin, is what happens is that you keep doing things for other people because you were programmed to do that. And then you turn around and talk smack about the people because they're not doing what you want them to do. And they're still having the same problems, different day. And so then we get tired, but we don't know how to say no, so we just keep doing it. And then we used to have a round table with my grandparents, and somebody would always be in trouble in the family at the round table, because everybody would be helping everybody, but everyone would get a turn. You know what I mean? Any of y'all got families where everybody gets a turn, to be in the doghouse is what they used to say in Texas, is they're in the doghouse. And so then somebody else ends up in there because it's about all the family being addicted to chaos and drama. And this is oftentimes where we need to set boundaries with ourselves too, is if we, observe, okay, I keep doing this and it keeps making me unhappy. And then I'm talking unwell about people. And it doesn't make me feel good to talk unwell about people because then when I have to look them in the face, I feel guilty. This is what happens. So we don't like to feel guilty. That's not a good feeling. So it's about understanding that we don't have to have these bad feelings. So this is what I'm saying. This is love, setting boundaries with ourselves out of love, not participating in behaviors that might have been learned behaviors. You have no boundaries yourself, Joe? Well, that's good that you don't have any chaos. Your neighbors aren't hearing you. You have no boundaries. Because, yeah. So boundaries are not rejection. A lot of people I work with tell me they don't want to set boundaries because they're afraid somebody's going to feel rejected, and they know what rejection feels like. And we talked about this week is about how we're really trying not to feel rejected, and it's projection when we're trying to keep somebody else from feeling rejection from the wound that we have ourselves that we have not healed. And so what ends up happening is we're doing that because we won't be abandoned to a degree. We're afraid of being abandoned. When I had to learn to practice setting my boundaries, because I read the book, I did the workbook, I did the work, but then I had to practice. Life is a series of practice and development. We can't just read a book and know how to do it. I tell y'all that I even had to go to therapy, and when I would twist off and, talk crazy, then I would have to go to therapy, and I would be feeling guilty about what did I say, what I said. And then she'd say, "What could you have said differently?" And I'm thinking if I would have known what to say differently, I would have said it differently. So she has to give me instructions. So then I had to take my pen out and say, "Wait a minute, let me write this down." Passing through slowly. Hey, it's good to see you here. How are you doing? If the house is empty, it's okay. I don't care what next door thinks. Well, that's an easy way. That's easy. Yeah, it's easy for me to have boundaries with the Grinch. Yeah. So boundaries are not rejection. They're not a lack of care. It doesn't mean you don't care about other people because you set boundaries with yourself and set boundaries with other people. Did you have problems setting boundaries because you had fear of rejection or fear of abandonment? I did. I did because I didn't value myself, Angela, at one time. And value took something for me to build in myself. It was already there, but the acknowledgement of it, the crazy thing is we got to get comfortable setting boundaries to build that so we don't allow certain behaviors and subject ourselves to certain behaviors over and over again. So setting those boundaries with myself that I wouldn't, allow myself to be pulled in to relationships where that didn't serve me, to relationships. Hey, Run and passing through. I'm glad everything's great. Everything's good here. Everything's good here. So I did. I had those problems setting boundaries at first. And when I would go to therapy or coaching, she would say, "What are you afraid of?" And I would have to get down to the point to where it was really afraid of abandonment. That's what it was. That's why I learned that when we're saying, but I'm afraid to set boundaries because I'm afraid I'll hurt somebody's feelings. We're afraid of abandonment, but we haven't acknowledged our own self. We're too busy not considering ourselves, but it doesn't mean that subconsciously we're not. And Joe, I am who I am. I can't change it, be honest. Well, we can all change. Thank God I've changed in the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Rodolfo, you're not doing people any favors by letting them treat you like dog crap. No, you are not. They might have a better chance of getting better if you don't let them get away with it. Absolutely. Because you're right. We do teach people how to treat us. And that's the thing. So when we learn to set loving boundaries, we are teaching people that this is what I won't deal with and this is what we will. Codependents are afraid of losing the connection. Absolutely. Codependents are afraid of losing the connection. Should you change? You have to decide if you need to change. I can't tell you if you need to change. Now, if you want certain things in your life that aren't coming in your life, you might, because if we want something different, we have to do something different. And this is where boundaries come in play too, is that we need to learn how to communicate differently because maybe we felt like a doormat. Like Angela is saying, codependents are afraid of losing the connection. So they will be a doormat. They'll keep saying, okay. Maybe some of the people that I've worked with that are codependent are afraid of losing touch with their grandkids because a lot of kids that have narcissistic traits will threaten that they'll take the grandkids away and they won't get to see the grandkids if they don't do what they say. you know and so they're afraid. And sometimes when we set these boundaries, people will abandon us because a lot of people are only going to be nice to you if you serve them. If you serve them, because there's some people in this life that they're going to go where they're served. And so you can decide for yourself if that's going to be you or if you realize that you want mutual. So if you want mutual, if you've taught somebody to treat you like a doormat, you have to start off small because maybe they will observe your boundaries if you're not dealing with a narcissist. Maybe they will observe your boundaries, but if you haven't asked for something, you're not going to get something you haven't asked for. So that's where, in my codependency, Angela, I had to learn how to use my words, how to ask for what I wanted, needed, and desired, and then how to handle rejection that I had feared before if I didn't get what I wanted and needed and desired. Then I would have to make a grown up choice and decision. I would have to be responsible for my own choices because a lot of codependent people are afraid to be even responsible for their own choices because they learned that fear maybe as a child. I did, as I learned that I really needed to, I depended on my mom. Sam, steal my glasses. Well, I've got to go. Got a few questions for you, beautiful, and I could listen to you all night, but it's 11:33 a.m. Okay, Joe, you get you some sleep, okay? And thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for subbing. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your participation this evening. So you have some blessed and regenerated rest, okay? All right. Hi, David. So here we go. So we need to stay emotionally present, honest, and healthy, right? And connected when we set a boundary. So this means looking somebody in the eye, not being afraid, and being able to have that adult conversation. See, when our inner child is wounded, and this is why we need that healing, because when our inner child is wounded, when our inner child is hurt, when our inner child is afraid, it's okay, Joe. You can go to sleep. Thank you, though. I appreciate that. That's sweet. If our inner child is wounded, okay. If our inner child, I didn't know what that said. Well, I don't totally understand what Shalish said. So if our inner child is wounded, there's a lot of fears there, and those fears need to be healed so that we can perceive things in a different way. Perceive things in our worth, perceive things in our value, because sometimes that's what that healing requires is for us to recognize that you were born worthy, you were born valuable. We just forget. A lot of codependent people want to get your undivided attention, not you have time to help them all. Some, yeah, some do, you know, they do want attention. But typically the people that they are involved with get all their attention. The thing is that a codependent person will focus on what everybody else wants and not what they themselves want. So a lot of people have codependency confused is that it's always it goes two ways, you see, because there's a strong one in codependency that's doing all the supporting, and they're the one that gets thrown off because they feel like I'm helping everybody all the time and no one's helping me. But a lot of codependent people have learned that they had to strive to be seen. They're afraid they're not going to be seen, so they have had to make themselves inexpendable, and they've had to compromise themselves and just say yes a lot of times just to get things done, and they become very capable. Codependent people are very capable, but some they give their power away, so they depend on somebody else to tell them and validate them their worth and their needs. That's what happens in codependency. And then when people do, they don't feel comfortable with that either, because a lot of codependent people have been verbally abused or not spoken to at all, not communicated with. John London, hello. It's good to see you this evening. And hello, Eddie. It's about attention and attraction. Well, some of it is, but a lot of people want attention and attraction. So we can't just label just the codependence about attention and attraction, because the narcissist wants to be the center of attention too. This is why codependents and narcissists tend to go together a whole lot, because the codependent will put all their focus on the narcissist, at least for a while. But then the codependent, after a while, will start feeling neglected, and they'll become fear of abandonment. So then we can get into anxious attachment and avoidant attachment too, because a lot of codependents do have the anxious attachment to where they're afraid of somebody leaving them, that abandonment. So they'll overperform, they'll overgive, they'll overdo things because they don't want to be left, because they haven't healed that abandonment yet inside. So we have to heal these things that cause us to overdo things. And that's where we set the boundaries with ourselves. When we do the healing, we can set the boundaries with ourselves. So then we have trust in ourselves. We're not being all wishy-washy. How many people have tried to set boundaries? And that's why they say, I've tried to set boundaries, but it doesn't work, because sometimes they get wishy-washy and they keep trying to set boundaries with maybe people who are going to misunderstand their boundaries, and they're not yet strong enough to make a choice. Angela, narcissists use fear and anger to intimidate the people around them. They sure do. They do. Codependents are very good, partners for narcissists. Lisa Romano talks about this a lot, about how codependents and narcissists kind of bond together, because a narcissist will show up love bombing and as a hero. You did separate from the narcissist in your life, Eddie? So the narcissist will show up at love bombing and as a hero. And so the codependents, they want to be saved because they've been abandoned or they've been this. So they want to be that princess up in the castle, or the prince up in the castle, who, somebody rides up and saves them, and then it's life happily ever after. But life doesn't happen like that, because we have to learn our language. It is a troublesome dynamic, isn't it, John London? So it's about healing ourselves, because the narcissist is probably not going to change. From all the studies that I've done on narcissism, they are not going to change, because they're terribly wounded. So I don't like us to pick on the narcissist and villainize the narcissist, because they're already terribly wounded. And even with bullies, narcissists can be bullies. And even with bullies have been bullied before, typically, just like the annoying pigeons that steal my bird food. Yeah. So, it's about that's where discernment comes in, is where we're healing ourselves, so that what we will tolerate, because we won't have a villain if we don't tolerate villainous behavior, or people who are committed to misunderstanding us, or people who are trying to bully us. We won't tolerate that if we learn to set the boundaries with ourselves. It's like, I'm not attracted to somebody who, and we're more, when we learn self-trust, we're not trusting the wrong people, if that makes sense. So healing ourselves is where we learn to trust ourselves. Eddie, okay, Eddie, you're interesting. Well, thank you, Eddie. Have you subscribed to my channel? I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, because I got some more interesting stuff. Narcissists feel entitled to break all of our boundaries. Yes. They'll break your boundaries. They'll break your stuff. They certainly will break your heart and step all over it. And then they'll say, you good? They'll say something, throw it off, or do something, throw it off. And then you're sulking because you can't say anything, because they're going to twist it and turn it back on you. And then they say after, a few hours, you good? Just like you can say anything. It's like you really just, can't do anything. So, yeah, so it's about learning to trust ourselves, and we'll learn to trust ourselves when we heal ourselves. You just have to not care about offending people. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I'm not saying that we don't have to, be nice to people, but we have to not care about offending people, because a lot of times the things that we may think are offensive aren't even offensive. When people are afraid of setting boundaries, afraid of saying no, no is not an offensive word. It's not an offensive word. No is not. No boundaries will be ignored. Yes, they certainly will. And you can't even blame the other person if we don't learn to set boundaries. So it's not about blaming. Empowerment isn't about blaming. We can't blame somebody else and empower ourselves. I had to learn this. I had to learn to use my big girl words, because I was acting in codependence. I learned codependency. And so what I had to learn is to use my big girl words, that nobody was responsible to know what my needs were. I had to tell people what my needs were. I had to tell people what I would accept. I had to tell people when things didn't work for me, or else they'd keep doing things. And I couldn't wait until I'm 10 years into a relationship. That's exaggeration. But I couldn't wait till I was so many years into a relationship, because that's what we do oftentimes when we don't have boundaries, is we'll stay in something, past the expiration date. If anything, they're offending us by crossing our boundaries, so F them. Right. That's when we know what our boundaries are, but a lot of people aren't they're not sure if they're being offended or not. So a lot of people grow up in verbal abuse and don't know that this is verbal abuse. We have to trust ourselves, protect ourselves, and validate ourselves. Absolutely. In a loving way. Exactly. Sometimes they don't know they're crossing boundaries. Yes, some people don't know they're crossing boundaries, and some people don't know how to set boundaries. So, oh, I hear you. I don't like to burn stuff either. Sometimes I had some eggs on the other day. I had to get up and go turn those eggs off. I am not an AI thing. Ty Hughes. Okay. All right. So back to the notes. This is when we get back to the notes because I can get off on another thing. Boundaries are there to be broken. Well, this is why I say there's catalysts for our growth because there's a lot of good people who learn how to set boundaries. We're never too old. It's never too late to learn how to set boundaries, to learn how to love yourself. Because boundaries aren't, if you don't have boundaries, you're not loving yourself. And you won't feel loved by somebody else because your soul knows when you're being mistreated. Your soul knows this. Your ego may be saying, yeah, but I've been here this long and it was like this, and we'll rationalize and justify to try to protect ourselves from rejection. Only in a good way. Some crazy people know they're breaking your boundaries, but they don't care. Absolutely. Some people just don't care. And those people aren't my people, right? They're not our people, are they, Angela? No, once we learn what verbal abuse is, a lot of people don't know what verbal abuse is. Once you know what verbal abuse is, once you know what gaslighting is, because a lot of people will gaslight you when you try to set a boundary. They'll try to tell you you need to be feeling like something else or you need to be doing something else or that you're crazy. I never understood people like that. Like, why? It's just a lot of things are learned behaviors, and so a lot of I don't, people grow up in different households and there's different behaviors in different households. Some of the people I work with grew up in a house where people were non communicative, they just didn't communicate. And so the people just always tried to be seen, you know, and they were just trying all the time, just trying. And I work with some people like myself that grew up in chaotic households, and we have to learn to regulate. And we have to learn to sit with things and hear things as they are, not from the past voices, but from the present. We have to learn how to sit still with ourselves. Hello, Tenzink. Joe. If you knew how my ex was, the rule book was burnt. I hear you. Toothbrush, I felt like it's a power move. It makes them feel above you. Exactly. This is totally a narcissistic behavior, the need to feel superior to you. See, this is like if you want a mutual relationship, you must have boundaries. In this way, we can negotiate because we're not always going to be liked. We're not always going to get along. But if we can negotiate and respect each other, it's about respect. So, yeah, Robbie. No, I didn't see the comments. I'm just now seeing are my comments showing. Toothbrush says yes. And then he says, thanks, Bud. 100%. That's right, really insightful for my mom and her brothers and sisters being seen. Yes. Yeah. All right, Eddie B35. Robbie, I wonder why I wasn't seeing your comments. Huh. Yeah, okay. Can't blame anyone for trespassing if we don't have a no trespass. That's exactly it. I finally saw that one, Robbie. I'm sorry. Now I see. I like that one. So I'll even pin it after finding it. Let's pin it. I learned how to do that too. All right. Thank you. Absolutely. You see, that's why in codependency, I had to learn to use my big girl words. I had to learn to say, I feel like this to keep it in my ballpark because the learned behavior for a codependent is you made me feel like this, or you think this, or you think that, because what we do is we project our fears out when we're in the codependent. We think you're rejecting me. You're not attracted to me. You think that I'm stupid. You think, and it's all about you, they, them. It's not about me. See, in codependency, we have to learn how to own our feelings, not project our feelings onto somebody else, worried about that being our fears. See, we have to face our fears, and then we're not going to do that. Respect yourself and set boundaries early. If that doesn't work, find a new friend. Absolutely, Ty Hughes. Absolutely. So let's see what else. Toothbrush. I am not a psychologist. I am a mindset coach, life coach. Narcissists feel powerful and important when they, yes, I just said that one. I know you weren't taking his comments out, darling. I don't know. I missed it. I think YouTube defaults on top comments instead of all. Okay, John, that explains it. Because I found the one, but I didn't find any other ones after the. Well, I found the two when he said, could I not see it? But I only found one. All right. Toothbrush. Sometimes, yeah. Ah, yeah, see. So that's must have been what it was. You're important, Robbie. We wouldn't overlook you. Mm-mm. So, boundaries are the language of love. They're not rejection. They're not a lack of care. They're not saying, I don't love you. That's not what they're saying. They're saying, I love myself enough to remain honest. When I was in that relationship with that narcissistic person, I had great times with that narcissistic person. I probably have walked more in my life than I'll ever walk with anybody else on this last, 10 years, my other 10 years. And there's some great things about that person. They were catalysts for my growth, but I couldn't love them and love me too, you see. And if I want a mutual love, then that's not the place to be. So that's what we have to finally realize within ourselves is, are you going to play small? Are you going to have a superior? Are you going to have someone in your life that is going to twist off? So after you set a boundary, and if somebody's committed to not respecting them, you get to decide and make a choice through your healing process. If you do the healing processes, is this for me? This is empowering, passing through slowly, got to go, living life on life's terms. I tuned in at just the right time to hear exactly what I needed to hear today. All right. Well, I'm glad that you stopped by, passing through slowly. And that's what I say is life on life's terms. So I'm glad that you remember that. Thank you. You have a good evening. So many people confuse boundaries with conflict. They're afraid of conflict and confrontation, but boundaries will reduce resentment, because when we feel like we have, we talked about this, when we feel like we have to do something or we've got to do something, we're feeling obligated. Obligation creates resentment. Discernment is from love. Discernment is we're not judging, because when I say narcissist, I really, like I said, I don't want to villainize them, because it doesn't serve me to judge them. It, does serve me to have boundaries with them, but doesn't serve me to judge them. Because I wasn't put here to be judging anybody. So, but to be healing. And I couldn't have healed my own growing up, my own childhood trauma, if I wouldn't have been with that person. That was in direct correlation. Like Robbie says, is you can't blame them when you don't, you don't set the boundaries. So I don't understand that, David Mayfield. So without boundaries, relationships become strained by resentments, burnout, passive aggressiveness, emotional withdrawal, and unspoken expectations and repeated disappointments. Hello, Primaries. Diaspora. I don't know. Okay. So that's why boundaries create healthier relationships. I didn't know that there was healthy and unhealthy relationships. I just thought relationships were relationships for a very long time. Relationships aren't just relationships. All relationships can be catalysts for our growth. And it does feel good once you do learn about boundaries and once we do develop our self-esteem, because it's up to us to develop our self-esteem. They just weren't handed out like tickets at a door. That's not for me anyway. I had to learn self-esteem. So it wasn't taught to us in school how to have self-esteem. I wish it would be taught in school how to have self-esteem, how to honor ourselves. When we have boundaries, we get to honor ourselves and honor someone else, because when we just say no when we don't want to do something, instead of doing something we don't want to do, we're not going to talk smack about people and talk about the whole how horrible the whole situation was and just go along and be all like weird and sulky and feeling out of place. Codependents believe that enmeshment is normal and nobody in the family should have boundaries. Absolutely. That's what they do believe. That's what they do believe. So when you start having boundaries, like when I started having boundaries, I can't tell you that my family was real thrilled about it, but they have accepted it. So I do still have a relationship with my family, but they just accept it that I'm not going to, you know, be a part of that. Prime race. It is the one where we realize with real eyes. Yes. Yes, I like that. We realize with real eyes. I heard that earlier today. What did I hear that on? I don't know, but I heard that earlier today. So that's always funny when these serendipitous things pop up. Thank you for those. Hey, Tony. John London, I'm still growing, learning self-esteem. I felt like worthless before. I won't go back to that. No, me too, John London. And it's an adventure. That's what's cool is self-esteem helps us to take these little steps to where it's like we're able to know, it's humility, not humiliated. Self-esteem is created through humility. It's getting to learn and grow rather than judge ourselves. See, that's the thing is when we let go of that judgment, we learn discernment. We humanize ourselves and we can humanize other people. Even when other people are disappointing and they let us down, we can choose not to participate in other people's lives that will let us down. But we can also let them be human and not villainize them. Yes, they will block certain words. Just a couple of my comments were not blocked, not read. No biggie. I was just wondering if Stacy was seeing. Aw, no, I just only saw the one, and I pinned it, but I didn't. And then when you said, "Are they being seen?" I was like, I didn't see any. But I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that I can see them now. Angela, narcissists accuse you of being evil if you don't allow them to break your boundaries. Absolutely. And they will smear your name. They will smear your name. They sure will. And they'll tell people crazy things about you that aren't true. They tell people that you're mad at them, that you're doing this when it's really them that's attacking you, right? Tony, just saw your channel bio. Wow, you're into a lot of things. I had to sub. Oh, good. I'm glad you subbed, Tony. Thank you so much. Yeah, y'all, if you haven't subbed, if this stuff resonates with you, then please sub because I appreciate so much that you're spending your time here with me. And I also appreciate that you're feeding this kind of algorithm because I know that you could be feeding another algorithm, going down a rabbit hole of doom and despair. And what I'm trying to do is create hope here and healing here, that we can feel comfortable being ourselves. And I just love that everyone gets to uplift each other here. And there's so many great people here that lift each other up and that we get to recognize each other. We're building quite a cool community here. Okay, good, Robbie and John London. Are you going to sleep now? All right. You have a good night. Get you some blessed and regenerated rest. And hopefully you can join me Sunday on here for story time. All right. Thank you so much, John London. You sleep well. So, boundaries create healthier relationships. Boundaries help build trust. Learning to set those boundaries, because we get self esteem from ourselves. Self trust is from ourselves. So, once we have self trust, we know when to set boundaries and when not to set boundaries. We know, and what I mean by when not to set boundaries, we know that when we're being triggered, we know the difference between being triggered and the difference between being really mistreated, because a lot of people will be mistreated under, the way that they were brought up in the family. They think this is the way that it always is. Some people will be mistreated under religion, that they think that they're supposed to sacrifice once again. Some people will be mistreated under, different kinds of umbrellas. And I had to learn, my coach told me, Stacy, it's not spiritual to be abused. So trust grows when people feel heard and respected. So it's mutual when people feel heard and respected. It's about, like at the codependence, like Angela is saying, oh, you're very welcome, Angela. I appreciate you being here, and I always appreciate your participation too. So, with the codependence, I forgot what I was going to say. See, this is why I have notes, because I get excited getting to talk to you and see your comments. And absolutely. So when someone honors a boundary consistently, emotional safety develops. Like Robbie was saying earlier, if we don't ask for something, we're not going to get it. So we have to get comfortable using our big girl words. I had to get comfortable learning my language. As a child, oftentimes people were our thoughts are expressions of our words, and if our words were dismissed and our feelings were discarded, we didn't learn how to express. We didn't learn how to express those things. If we don't learn how to express it, we can't have an expectation that it's just going to happen. But I know that I did in my codependency. I had an expectation that people should know and that they just needed to act. I would barely, I would just hint about things, manipulate, and things like this because I was afraid of being rejected. And if people get honest with themselves, sometimes that's what they do. So we have to give up that fear. The fears are what we need to heal. Where did they come from? The what, when, where, how, and why. And this is what makes our stories, our adventures, so fascinating. Mukesh. I am good, and I'm from Fort Worth, Texas, but I'm living near Cancun. So we want predictability. A lot of people are afraid in uncertainty. So honesty becomes safer. Well, we can get honest with ourselves. The honesty has to come with ourselves first so that we're not second guessing ourselves. What do I want? That was another thing when I was in coaching. What do you want, Stacy? So I always was working from the fears of what I don't want. So I had to learn how to shoot myself towards what do I want. Thank you. Thank you, Mukesh. So healthy boundaries often look like this, y'all. Someone listening without becoming defensive. Limits being respected without guilt, punishment, or pressure. Needs being acknowledged even when they cannot be immediately met. Sometimes when we're healing from wounds and we do come off sideways, we do come off throat off. When we apologize, it's not just about saying, I'm sorry, I did it again, and da 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 da. Saying, I'm sorry and I'm working on it. I'm sorry that I did this. I'm sorry that I snapped at you. I'm sorry that I accused you. I'm sorry that I did this, or I apologize. I regret. And I'm working on it and really work on it. Can't just say we're sorry because we aren't always perfect. So boundaries will look different for different people. Our trauma history, values, culture, nervous systems, and experiences all influence what feels safe to us and respectable and manageable. So it's about being able to make those choices. What do I want? I want to feel safe, respected, and managed, have my life manageable. I don't want my life to be unmanageable to where I'm feeling like I have to go with it, somebody else's whim all the time because I can't have my own boundaries. I can't do what I want to do. You have to have boundaries to have empowerment. So not everyone will understand our boundaries, and that's okay. Maybe they're not your people. We don't have to, everyone doesn't have to like us, and we don't have to like everyone. So boundaries are not about universal approval. Boundaries are not about, what they are about is they're about self-respect. They're about self-respect. Sometimes boundaries are hardest when we know we're being used. I had a client one time tell me, she said, she got in a new relationship. I counsel, work with people and building that self-esteem and to not be the one always calling all the time. Thank you, Casey. And not to be the one always calling all the time because they would go on a date and then, so they had anxious attachment, and they moved fast in relationships. And so working with a few of the clients, being afraid in relationships and things like this. I have a couple of them that have gotten in these new healthy relationships, and one of them, when we were talking, she said, well, I said this to him one day, and he looked at me weird because they were moving in together, and she said, and he looked at me weird, but they had been dating a while. And she said, then I told him just kidding, but I really wasn't. And I said, well, why did you tell him just kidding? Because that's like, I believe we need to be honest. And she said, well, because I was afraid, of being used, you know. And she'd told me earlier that what was it? He didn't ask her for something or something. And I said, isn't that, oh, she didn't feel needed. That's what she told me. She says, I don't feel needed by him. That's kind of weird. And then later she told me she was afraid of being used. I said, well, isn't it weird that you told me that he doesn't need you? Because, I know for me in a relationship, I want to be wanted. I don't want to be needed because I don't create obligation anymore, and I don't create that indispensability. It's a mutual thing, and that's wanting, not needing. And so she said, I didn't feel, he doesn't need me. And so then she was afraid of being used. I said, isn't that interesting that you've got a person who doesn't need you like the others did, that was, familiar to her, was being needed. And I said, but you're afraid he's going to use you. You see, I said, you see, there's a difference there. So he doesn't need you, and he's not going to use you because he doesn't need you. So when you look at these patterns and connect these dots, then we can be more empowered and not be worrying about things that we don't need to be spending our mind worrying on. So we often know and we recognize these patterns that I'm talking about, and the same people keep showing up with the same problems, the same promises, the same apologies, the same request, and we say this time and no more. So they won't take us seriously. Yes, that's what I was saying, is that we need to work on healing ourselves so that we can come from a place and set loving boundaries. Because if we are wounded, we're going to be uncertain, because when we know that the boundaries are coming from the wound, or we're twisting off and we say something that's mean coming from a trigger, a wound, then we're going to second guess ourselves and keep going back and forth, and that we won't trust ourselves. So boundaries are a part of self-trust too. A lot of people think boundaries are threats, and they're not. Boundaries are a follow through. So it's about following through. When we tell people no more, it means no more. Because boundaries aren't about controlling. Boundaries are about loving ourselves. That's why I say we set the boundaries with ourselves first, because it's an act of self love. We learn to say what we mean and mean what we say, and don't be mean when we say it. This is loving boundaries. We also must learn to set those boundaries with ourselves, really with ourselves first, so that we feel comfortable extending them outwards. So boundaries with ourselves sound like this, okay? I will not abandon myself to keep others comfortable. I will not override my intuition. When you feel like you're being used, don't override the intuition. I will not react impulsively. I will pause and process first. I will listen to myself. We have to consider ourselves. We must break the habit of giving our power away. Power is not control. Power is self-responsibility. That's saying, when we have our feelings hurt, being able to say, my feelings were hurt and I felt like this when this happened. What can we do about that? Can you meet me? First off, I hope you have a trusted friend or a coach or a therapist or a clergy that you can talk to. Because, with men and women, if it's a male and female thing, men like everything to the chase. They like it short and sweet. They can't help you process your feelings. And a lot of us need to process our feelings. So do have somebody you trust to help you process your feelings. This means somebody who doesn't have a vested interest, who isn't just going to co-sign, stuff. Robbie, so true. No, no does mean no, not negotiable. That's right. That's right. So power is honoring ourselves because when we honor ourselves, we're going to honor someone else. So many of us learn passive aggressiveness because we didn't know how to communicate disappointment directly. See, that's all that it is we don't need to shame ourselves anymore. We need to heal where we felt shame before. So just learning how to communicate more directly. I had to learn to communicate more directly, to say it hurts my feelings when this happens. When you're late, it hurts my feelings when you're late. It hurts my feelings when this happens. So we became resentful if we didn't communicate directly. We'll become indirect, sarcastic, withdrawn, explosive. Angela, we don't need to be with men to use them as a source of validation or approval, but we need men as equal partners. Absolutely. That mutuality. We don't want one-sided relationships, right? It's that mutuality to where we can talk with each other and not be afraid. So many people are afraid to express their feelings, afraid of being hurt, and they're still hurting, right? We still hurt ourselves. I get it. I used to do it too, afraid to express my feelings because afraid of being hurt. But I would still be being hurt, even being afraid. My protection was skewed. So as long as we keep using the same language, we often keep getting the same results. You see, because our words are expressions of our thoughts. And if we want things to happen differently, we have to think different and then express it different. Yes. Thank you, Robbie. So, and then we feel unseen and unheard when we keep doing the same thing, keep communicating the same way. So we have to learn a different way to communicate if we want different results, or we need to be empowered in our choices to not participate in things that no longer make us feel good or make us feel happy because you were born here to feel happy and feel good. Are we going to feel happy and feel good all the time? No, because life is a growth, life is an adventure, life on life's terms, like I say, and there's many catalysts for our growth in this life in life's terms, but we do not deserve to be a doormat. We do not deserve to be mistreated. We don't deserve these things. There's no reason you deserve that. Life is meant to be lived, and it has different colors, textures, and sounds, and we get to choose what different colors, textures, and sounds. So make sure we're making choices that are in alignment with us and mutual choices. So healing requires a new language that says, that doesn't work for me. It's okay. I'm no longer available for this dynamic when people are trying to draw you into drama or they're trying to draw you into chaos. I need time to process before responding to this. When somebody pushes your buttons and you need time to process, like I said, process with your friends, process, with somebody who's not going to co-sign, who's going to be able to see both sides, about how, if you did, because I told y'all, I used to communicate like the way that I learned to communicate growing up, where sometimes what I would say, I wouldn't be trying to sound that way, but I would sound, a way that was sideways, but I wasn't trying to sound that way. That was just how I learned to communicate growing up. And I had to learn to change the way I communicated, to change the way that things happened outside of me. We deserve to feel emotionally safe in a relationship, and men need to provide that safety. Yes. Yes, indeed. I agree, Angela. So that's one of the things, I always get the ladies that I worked with that have relationships now. I had them make a list. I'm like, make a list of what kind of man that you want. Because if we don't, we have gotten into relationships just where there was attraction, physical attraction. It doesn't mean you're compatible because we get physically attracted to people. That's how I've learned my biggest lessons, is that we're not necessarily compatible because we're physically attracted. So making this list. And so when we make this list and we get clear on our list of what we do want, then we won't navigate or steer away from those things. So when we start seeing things that aren't in alignment with that, then we'll be like, okay, well, this has been nice. And, we get to date, actually. I know for a lot of us, we'll just, the relationships, oh, they like me. And so we just will date and we are attracted to each other, but then, that 3 months we start dismissing the red flags and things that, are not gonna be compatible with us. And that's when we end up in these relationships longer than the expiration date. So having that list, and one of the things at the top of my list is confidence. It's not, exactly how they look or anything like that. It's confidence, because this would be somebody who, you know, who can be mutual, somebody who can respect my boundaries and not feel what Nicholas Underwood, Jesus offer sub. Okay, well, thank you, Nicholas. I'm starting to get tired. Are y'all getting tired? So, but yeah, we need to feel emotionally safe. So, saying also, I care about this relationship and I need honesty and respect, because if you catch somebody in a lie, that's not going to work, is it? If this continues, I will need to remove myself from this situation. If you don't feel safe, you have to say, I need to remove myself from this situation. If it's mentally safe, emotionally safe, physically safe, by all means, you better get out now. But, spiritually safe. You deserve to be a whole person. See, this makes us mutual. No one else is going to complete us like in that movie. No, we're whole, and then we come together with a whole, and then that makes it mutual. Because if we're trying to pull somebody out or they're trying to pull us out, it's not going to be an equal or mutual relationship. Nobody needs to be rescued. So healthy boundaries do not dictate another person's behavior. They clarify our own. See? Instead of, you can't speak to me that way, a loving boundary may sound like this. If the conversation becomes disrespectful, I will end the conversation and reconnect later. And then at some point in time, you may not be able to, because some people will just keep being disrespectful. So this is not punishment. This is self-respect. Boundaries are not barriers to love. They're what makes love sustainable. Healthy relationships make room for both connection and autonomy. You see, you get to have your own account without your partner's name on it. I'm kidding. It's okay if people feel comfortable with that. Boundaries allow us to remain emotionally engaged without becoming resentful, overwhelmed, passive aggressive, or depleted. Boundaries are not walls, they're a language of love and care. So, and when we learn to honor our boundaries, we begin building relationships rooted in honesty, respect, and emotional maturity. Because loving boundaries are not about pushing people away. It's not about one person being superior and talking to another person like they're a child. Right, Angela? That's not it. That's not a loving boundary. Loving boundaries are like this. This is something that bothers me, and we have to also be able to process these things within ourselves. Is this a deal breaker? I used to have a friend that was one of my. We do not need to. We do. We do need to put a little cement on our brakey and harden up on how we allow to be spoken to or treated, I believe. Yes, we need walls with narcissists and boundaries with healthy people. Yes. Yeah, sometimes you got to go no contact would be like the walls with a narcissist is no contact, you know. We're almost done, y'all. Almost ready to breathe, y'all. So boundaries, loving boundaries don't push people away. They're about staying connected with ourselves while in a relationship with others so that we're not in that avoidant and attachment relationship, the anxious attachment and the avoidant relationship. It's that mutual relationship. So we're both feeling seen and we're both feeling heard and we're both able to laugh at and with ourselves and carry on. It's about joy, having joy, real joy, that childlike playfulness in relationships. Will we always agree? No. But can we negotiate? Can we respect each other? So this is where trust begins. This is where self-esteem grows, and that is where healing becomes relational. Thank you, Angela. I appreciate that. All right, Nicholas. Thank you so much for being here, Nicholas. Some of the guidelines on this channel is that while people may have their own belief systems, we respect everybody's belief system. So we don't talk about religion or politics or my age on here. So this is why people we don't get into this. We're not, we respect each other's beliefs. So there's so many people on here and I love it from so many places. Nicholas, we don't do preaching on here, okay? All right. Y'all, we are ready to breathe. Y'all ready to breathe? We respect yours. It's just that you can't be preaching to people up here on my channel, darling. We respect it. You can have your beliefs. I used to allow being treated poorly because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. I know. But at the same time, we're trying not to get our own feelings hurt, right? Because we're afraid a lot of times. Sometimes we don't feel worthy enough, you know? You can do what you want, actually, and I can too. All right. Y'all ready to breathe? That might have been a boundary hunter. So let's breathe, darlings. All right. I'm getting tired. I can't deal with Nicholas right now. What'd somebody say? Rodolfo. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I just love and appreciate y'all. And I'm so happy to see you here, Robbie, Angela, Rodolfo. When John's here, John London is here, and Kim, of course, and everyone here. I thank y'all so much for being here and spending your Friday night with me. And for all of you who have subscribed to this channel, and I look forward, I will be back on here Sunday. We will have story time at 9 a.m. Oh, you're very welcome, Angela. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. We will have story time on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, 9 a.m. Thank you for those hearts. I appreciate you all. Is Kim still here? Or is that Miss Kim? So, yeah, I just love y'all. So let's do some breathing. Let's breathe in love and breathe out, release anything. There you are. You have an awesome weekend with your baby girl this weekend, Kim. Thank you so much. Mug Love. Okay, look at that. There's Mug Love. Everybody say hi to Mug Love. We're about to breathe, Mug Love. You made it just in time for the breathing. Grinch is in his little house. I've got his little house over here this evening. He's out. Can you hear him talking? All right, Mug Love. We're about to breathe. Hello there. No, we're not singing Hit Me Up by Tupac. We're about to breathe, darling. You going to breathe with us? Hello there. Thank you, Kim. I just love you. So let's breathe, darlings. I'm ready to breathe. Let's just take a deep breath in, breathing in self-love, self-respect, self-worth, and releasing all the tension in our bodies, all the weekly things that have gone on, and just being here now. So let's take that deep breath in, filling up our tummy. Raising our shoulders, neck, and head held high, and hold it for 4 counts if you can. And release gently and slowly out of your mouth. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Breathe. Hold it. And release. Is that tightness in your body disappearing if you have it? Just 2 more. Breathe in. Hold it. Release. Last one. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. All right. Thank y'all so much. You're going to be logging off in a few minutes, about to drive a bicycle. All right. You get sarcastic, Rodolfo, as long as the air's. There you go. There you go. All right. Thank y'all so much. I hope you have a fantastic Saturday. I look forward to seeing you Sunday at 9 a.m. Thanks again so much, everyone, for being here. And much love and appreciation. Good night. And Robbie, I guess it's like Saturday where you are, huh? So Robbie gets ahead of us, y'all. So does John London. Angela. You'll lose yourself trying to be understood by people committed to miss. Absolutely. You sure will. You sure will. Let me, oh, what'd I do? I was going to pin it, but it didn't work so well. Okay. All right. Let's see if it will pin it now. Yeah, we'll put that in there. There you go. All right. Well, I'm glad you can sing properly now. There you go. All right. You're going for a ride, Robbie? All righty. Well, enjoy. Enjoy. Hello there. Where are you at? All right. Well, y'all have a good night, and I look forward to seeing you Sunday. I am going to sleep here pretty soon. Stay true to you. When people don't like it, they're jealous of you. That could be very true, my glove. Could be. You have a safe bike ride too. Robbie's going for a bike ride. You're going on your bicycle, and you're from London too. Hello there. Well, thank you for being here. It's already Saturday where you are too, huh? I'm from Texas, but I'm sitting near beautiful Cancun, Mexico. Thank you. Hello there. If you didn't subscribe, please subscribe. I'll be back on here Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, okay? All right. Thank y'all so much for being here, all of you. I appreciate you. All right. Good night. Gotta love a Southerner. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to blow the wind through your hair. All right, Robbie. Have fun. All right. Thank you. Hello there. All right. Good night, y'all. Thanks, Kimmy. All right. Thank you. Bye.